Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Story Time. We have had a lot of male guests on the show, which definitely not complaining about, but I'm so excited because today we have a really powerful woman in sports who is going to share her story, some challenges, and just kind of how she got to where she is today. So it is Gabrielle Starr. She is the founder of Girl at the Game. Um, I'll let you hear from her where you can find out more information and follow her. But I promise you're going to want to hear this one because she is so amazing. So stay tuned and enjoy. All right, welcome back, everyone. I am so excited because I am here with one of the queens of women in sports, especially baseball, Gabrielle Starr. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm doing well. Well, I want to jump right into it because obviously I've been following you on social media for a while now. You have such an amazing presence, but the main thing that you support and talk about is Girl at the Game, which you founded. So kind of take me through how you started that and for everybody that doesn't know what it is.
Yeah, thank you. So Girl at the Game started out as like a hobby. I just wanted a place where I could write about sports because, there wasn't really any place where I could go and be like, "Hey, I just really love baseball. I want to write about it." That's not like a thing that exists. Like you're either a professional sports writer or you're not. And it's interesting because that's kind of actually how Bleacher Report started, way, way back. Like my dad, for fun, used to write about tennis for Bleacher Report back when like you could just write for Bleacher Report. And I
Mhm.
really liked that, if you were just passionate about something and you were a good enough writer, you could like write in full sentences and like you knew where to put a comma, like you could just write about sports and like no one was gonna tell you you couldn't gatekeep and all that kind of stuff, which there's so much of in this industry. So I started this like blog for myself. I was the only one. I like had a WordPress account because of another job, and I was like, all right, what's a cute alliterative name? And at first I was going to be like, oh, it's Gabrielle at the Game. And I was like, no, but like my whole point is just like I'm just another girl at the game. So I just typed out Girl at the Game and I started it, and people responded like really positively to it, and overwhelmingly just like were very into it. And when I started, I had like 240 followers on Twitter, and nobody knew who I was. And I just like really loved David Ortiz, and I just loved baseball history. And then very quickly, because of the response that it was getting, I kind of realized like, oh, this could actually be like a thing. It doesn't just have to be, I mean, I firmly believe everyone should have like a hobby that's not a job and like doesn't necessarily make them money. There are tons of things I love to do that I don't do for like a job.
Mhm.
But I realized that Girl at the Game could actually be both a hobby and a career.
Mhm.
And so I kind of started taking it really seriously of like, you know, covering important topics, not just like writing the things that I love to write, but also writing about super important like issues in sports, like domestic violence, which is a cause that's very close to my heart. Performance enhancing drugs, substance abuse, the way minor leaguers are treated in baseball, for example, just like mental health things, which is another thing that I can relate to on a very serious level. And I just felt like a lot of the times when these issues are being reported on, it's kind of in like this very formulaic, I'm not going to say callous way, but just kind of cold of like, for example, an MLB player is accused of domestic abuse and he gets, they report the suspension, and then say it's like a pitcher, for example. Then like three sentences later, they'll be like, so and so posted in blank ERA over X
Yep.
innings pitched, for this team and this team. He finished the season, third last in the Cy Young, whatever. And
Mhm.
it was just stuff like that to me where I was like, this isn't how these things should be talked about. Like, it's just, I think it's a problem with where we are in sports, but I wanted to write about sports in a different way. I wanted to write about sports in a way that conveyed passion and focused on the actual issue at hand, and not, what was that like. If I was writing about what was going on the field, I was talking about that. If I was writing about an issue off the field that was probably a lot more important,
Mhm.
you're not going to find me, giving you someone's batting average if they're accused of beating their girlfriend,
Mhm.
etc. So Girl at the Game was really just the place where I just started finding my voice. And now I'm grateful to have other women on the site that also get to share their voices with the world. I truly love the girls that write for the site, and I'm really honored that they come and they want to put their writing on our website. Like it's a really huge sense of pride to me that they feel like it's a place where they want to be associated with.
Yeah, and I think that's actually how I found your profile on Girl at the Game. Is domestic violence is also very close to my heart. Same with mental health. And I remember just reading both your just tweets and then the articles, and it really is super important. And that kind of leads me to my next question. So we'll talk about being a woman in sports a little later, but just with talking about issues in general, whether you're a guy standing up for it or a girl, people, especially sports fans, don't take well to trying to bring out the personal issue and domestic violence, PED, stuff like that. So, what reactions have you seen? Because I'm sure, like when I told my story, it's not all positive. So, what did you see once you started actually taking a stand and talking about the personal side of those issues?
It's interesting because, especially what I'm seeing in the past year, just like with the election and everything too. I'm not going to get political, but just people on social media, it's like a huge problem of thinking that people exist for your entertainment. And we see it in sports too, of like, people would say to me, I come to you for your sports takes. So like, I don't want to see your political tweets. I'm like, okay, cool. But like, I don't tweet for you. Like, you
Hmm.
follow me because you like my sports tweets, but that doesn't mean that all I am is sports.
Hmm.
So sorry, like that's not, I don't care. I don't know who you are. And I'm not saying that to like, I'm grateful to have a large following, but the problem is that people think that you belong to them. And the same thing with athletes too. Like I'm obviously not going to compare myself to like a famous athlete, but the mentality of like, you know, following people on social media is a very similar situation to following a sports team. You think that you should have a say. You think that these people exist for your entertainment. It's I kind of liken it to when you were a kid, if you would run into a teacher outside of school and it felt really weird because like you just thought of them as your teacher.
Hmm.
you know the minute I step outside the zone of like entertaining people, I get a lot of like, well, I really only like your, puns or your baseball memes or your witty in-game coverage, live tweeting, making jokes, whatever. I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. That's 7% of my human existence, but like I'm glad that you enjoy it, but like I'm not going to stop being the rest of myself for
Hmm.
you. And I think that that's something we see a lot with athletes too, of especially this year, like watching baseball, watching the players push back against MLB to get games. MLB wanted fewer games, they didn't want to pay their players, and people are like, well, they're millionaires, it's fine. It's like, first of all, no. Billionaire baseball owners can afford to shoulder burdens that most people cannot.
Hmm.
They're much wealthier than the players. Most of the players make the minimum or close to it. And if they're taking a massive pay cut because of the prorated season, they're losing a ton of money. They still have to pay taxes, pay their agent fees. They still have to take care of their families, their people. John Henry spent a huge portion of this summer on his private yacht. You think he can't afford to pay minor leaguers $400 a week? And people just want these guys to go back and hit baseballs, or like the whole
Hmm.
shut up and play mentality of like, you don't exist to me unless you're on the court making free throws, with LeBron, for example, and stuff like that. I really just think it's a very toxic mentality that we have in sports now. And I think social media has played a huge part in growing that toxicity, because it's the same thing for people like me who are tweeting about sports, where it's like the second I talk about anything else, someone got mad at me once because I had a tweet about French fries. And they were like, I come here for your baseball. And I was like, so I'm not allowed to eat? I can't eat
What?
food. I can't talk about it. Was like the most like, just, it's crazy. It gets crazy. That's all I'm going to say.
That's insane that people would care that much and get mad about French fries. Like, what?
People, I've noticed, what I have learned is people will get mad at anything.
Mhm.
Like, literally, I joined TikTok recently, and I'm not super creative with it, but I'm enjoying it, and I have a
Mm.
family recipe for my Israeli family that's my favorite thing to make, and it's, like, really good for you. It's, a dish that's made in different ways all over the Mediterranean, Middle East, Spain, Morocco, North Africa, and my family's been making it for, like, 100 years. So I
Mhm.
made a video of myself making it, and I put it on TikTok, and some guy was like, "You're just, like, Israel didn't exist 50 years ago," which, fact check, it did. 1948 was not 50 years ago. And he's like, "Israelis are stealing culture from Arabs." I'm like, "Well, this dish is not from Arab people. It's actually from, like, 15 different countries."
Mhm.
And it's just, like, going on and on and on. And I tweeted, I was like, "Guys, I've never seen anything more indicative of how angry people are all the time on social media than a guy getting mad at me for posting a picture of myself making eggs on my TikTok." Like, literally, like, 15 comments. I had to block the guy. It was crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. And yeah, like you said, I think 2020, just between COVID and quarantine, and with us sports fans just not really having their sports back, like people are always looking for an outlet to take it out on. And it seems like people come after us just being women, viewing us as weak. And it's like, actually, you're talking to people that aren't afraid to fight back. So that's something I've always admired about you is you're never scared to
Mhm.
call anyone out. So I appreciate that.
I mean, I let a lot more go than I actually call out. It's very funny because I always, I've had people come to me and be like, "Well, it's not very ladylike of you." First of all, I don't give a crap. I don't know who you are. Like, I don't care if, like, some 60-year-old woman named Linda in Ohio thinks I'm not being ladylike. Like, Linda, why are you telling me to be more ladylike and not telling the person calling me a bleeping whore to not call me that? Like, why are you getting
Yeah.
mad at me for standing up for myself? But I think you're absolutely right. Like, the biggest thing I saw this year is without sports, you had all the toxicity and drama of sports Twitter, but nowhere to direct it because there were no games. So, like, everyone's taking out their pandemic fear, their anger, their frustration, they're trapped at home, their, and their sports fandom. You're looking for things to do. And I think we saw that a lot with cancel culture too, because
Mhm.
people just, like, were looking for something to do. And so you have people who are, like, actual terrible human beings being on the same level as, like, you know, a person, like, one person, like, having, making, like, one mistake
Mhm.
ever in their entire lives. Like, obviously there's, that's a whole different conversation, but just to say, like, the way social media, just, people think that they're the supreme authority on everything. They think that their opinion is wanted on everything.
Mhm.
They think that, people aren't allowed to change their minds. Like, when I was a kid, I didn't like onions. I wouldn't eat onions. I didn't like them. They made me feel sick. Now I like onions. And if somebody on Twitter, like, it's like the old takes exposed kind of thing of, like,
Mhm.
if I had tweeted 10 years ago I didn't like onions, and then I posted a recipe where I was using onions, people were like, "You're so fake. Like, you said you didn't like onions 10 years ago." And it's like, so I'm not allowed to think that a player has improved. I'm not allowed to think that, a player has devolved. I'm not allowed to change my mind ever
Mhm.
because someone's going to be like, "This you," and, like, pull up a tweet of mine from, like, well, that's not how sports work. People go
Mhm.
through good seasons, they go through bad seasons. Like, the Red Sox won 108 games in 2018, and then they were absolute crap this year. Does that mean that those players have never been good and will never be good again? No, it means that currently they're not playing well. It doesn't mean that they've
Mhm.
never played well before. Like, people, it's so extreme on social media to the point where I now have a new policy where if you don't have a profile picture and a name, I'm not engaging with you because you're not worth my time because you don't even have the balls to put your actual self. Like, I put myself
Mhm.
on social media every single day, and people don't seem to realize how hard that can be to
Mhm.
just, like, actually be yourself on social media. Like, the amount of crap I get just for existing as a woman in sports, and I'm sure you know too. So, like, if your profile picture is, like, a picture of a car or an athlete that's definitely not you, like, I know
Mhm.
you're not Ben Simmons, Keith, Keith with 72 numbers at the end of your username, and, it's a picture of Ben Simmons. Like, I'm not engaging with you
Mhm.
because you're not even brave enough to be you on social media.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good segue into the next topic. So we had Madison Curley on the show. I'm pretty sure you guys have I've seen you guys interact a bunch on social media, but
Hmm.
she was awesome. Obviously another powerful woman in sports, super successful collegiate athlete, now killing it in Texas. And we had a really good chat about being a woman in sports. So I want to kind of turn it over to you now. And um, we've already alluded to it this conversation, but how tough it can be, especially on social media, but for you in general, because you obviously are really passionate and loyal with the Red Sox. So you're always tweeting Red Sox takes. But I know people don't necessarily like that. They're like, that's a girl tweeting that, and that's a girl posting that. What gives you the right to do that? You aren't a male. You didn't play, like all of that. So for you, and just kind of starting girl at the game, knowing that you're going to get this woman in sports backlash, what has been the biggest challenge and that you've had to just overcome?
Well, the funny thing is that I did not expect this because I didn't go into Girl at the Game expecting anything from it. I was writing for myself, I was writing for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so it actually was like kind of a slap in the face the first few times that I experienced real like gatekeeping sexism in sports Twitter, because for me, it was like I was literally nobody when I started. And I mean, I still don't consider myself somebody, but I mean, in terms of like, I had 249 followers like on the day that I launched Girl at the Game. No one knew who I was. Like, I get my time hops now and I see tweets from like 10 years ago. And like, those tweets have 0 likes and retweets when I go click on them. And it's funny because like, I'll tweet something very similar now and that same tweet's going to get a huge engagement. So like, I
Mm-hmm.
know like the difference is like, I was nobody back then. So it was interesting because it was kind of like, well, why are you so mad? Like, you don't know who I am. I'm not saying something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just doing me. And I think that that's what's so like frustrating about sports is that a lot of the times, women aren't getting hated on because they're wrong or because their take is bad or because, they're not saying something factually accurate. They're getting hated on because they're a woman. Like you don't, it's not that you don't like my take because I've seen that you're retweeting people who are saying the same thing. The difference is those people have a dick and I don't. So, like, do you actually not like my take or do you not like that I'm a woman having this take? And most of the time, the answer is pretty clear based on what that account is like looking like and, what they're saying to me, because, and I've had this with like media members too. Like, I remember this one time, the first year I started Girl at the Game, I wrote this article about the Red Sox and I was very critical of their management style with John Farrell, who ended up, I predicted that he would get fired by the end of the season, which ended up being true.
Mm-hmm.
And, people gave me so much crap. And I was criticizing his inability to handle his own bullpen. And a former Red Sox player who's now like, pretty outspoken on Twitter, um, like quote tweeted, like I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I got quote tweeted by so and so. And at
Mm-hmm.
first I was excited. Then I saw what they had said and they were like, well, they basically um critiqued me without critiquing me, like saying, and I had met this person at a charity event too, which was what was so funny. Basically, they agreed with my take, which was that he would not even a take, like factually, John Farrell was bad at managing the bullpen. And so I was like, well, I replied to the tweet because basically he was like, this is crazy, like blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. He just was like quote tweeting me. When people just quote tweet you to just like add their own thing on top of
Yeah.
it. So I responded and I was like, so you're saying you don't agree that John Farrell is bad? And he goes, no, I agree. I'm just bored waiting on my flight to Vegas. And I was like, so you incited a bunch of dudes to come and tell me I'm a moron, even though you actually agree with what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the issue here? Or, for example, like, being in sports media, when you're working a game, you'll get a packet from the franchise, with like relevant statistics, all that kind of stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
the Red Sox give the media every single day, either online or in PD or, in a printout if you're at the ballpark, all the stats, all the relevant facts, streaks that are going on, everything they could possibly need to do their reporting, which is wonderful, super helpful, because before I had that, I used to have to look that all up myself. And it took forever and I'm not good with numbers. So like I'll tweet a stat. And look, we know like someone either has a 300 batting average or they don't. Like, I can't
Mhm.
just give someone a new batting average because David from Worcester doesn't like that I'm a woman tweeting about sports. So I'll tweet the same stat that like 15 other reporters are tweeting. And nobody else gets called a plagiarist except for me. And I'm like, okay, but we all got our information from the same place.
Mhm.
So how is it that I'm the only one who happens to be a woman and I'm the only one that you're coming at? It's interesting because I know a bunch of those people in the press room. I go out with, I mean, not now because it's COVID, but like, we'd go out to the same sports bar, we'd get burgers together, we'd talk,
Mhm.
we'd go out to have drinks. Like, these are people I'm friendly with, and we're all getting the same information. Like, they're not looking it up either. We're all getting it from the same source. And if I made up a stat just to placate them to be different, then I'd be dumb for not having the right number. So
Mhm.
it's like a very lose-lose situation, and I just, at this point, I'm kind of like out of F's to give, I guess. I just, there's so much gatekeeping in this industry, and like at this point, I used to weigh on me so much. It like destroyed my mental health, even up to like, this summer. And I'm just done. I'm just like doing my own thing. And, if I don't want to be on Twitter, I'm not going to be on Twitter. If I want to be on Twitter, I'll be on Twitter. But like,
Mhm.
I had to totally shift how I was using my social media because it was like totally consuming me. I was letting these people consume me. And like, they don't have a right to do that. Why am I giving them permission to do that?
Exactly. Well, one thing that did come out, or one positive thing that came out of 2020, is the Support Women in Sports movement. It's been amazing just to see the amount of both guys or males and females just getting on board and repping the merch and all of that. So there are
I have the sticker on
positives.
my computer.
Do you really?
Yeah, look.
Yes, love it. It's been amazing. Like, it's the whole squad now that we're like one big family. So there are positives to being a woman in sports, but for you, what is the greatest thing about being a woman in sports?
I would say it's probably that. It's that there can be a lot of fighting between girls in sports. And I think that
Mhm.
that's really sad because we should all be supporting each other. You know, there's already enough stacked against us as it is. But when you really do find like your community of women in sports, you have a support system, people that you can vent to, people who will help you take down Twitter trolls, people who will just cheer you up, people who you can
Mhm.
bounce ideas off of. And, that's like the nice thing because even though the sports community is like small compared to like, say, finance or something,
Mhm.
it still is, it can be lonely, if you don't find your people. And, um, that's taken me a while to figure out because I'm the kind of person who likes to be friends with everybody. And I
Same.
realized that that was also like, it wasn't serving me well because I was just like letting people into my life who didn't deserve space in my
Mhm.
life and, would then end up kind of like screwing me over. Um, but, you kind of have to walk this line of like, making sure you're part of a good community that's like, you're good for them and they're good for you. And also just like protecting yourself and protecting your work, you
Mhm.
know. Um and that took me a long time to realize too. I mean, I think because I didn't come into sports expecting to work in sports, um like I kind of had to figure that out the hard way. But the best thing is when like younger girls or even girls my age, like anybody, but specifically like younger girls reach out to me, like DM me and be like, hey, I just want to let you know, like I read all your stuff. I really love what you do. You make me want to be in sports, stuff like that.
Oh.
And I save every single one. Like I screenshot them and I save them. I have a little folder on my phone of like, all these girls. And like if I'm having a bad day, I'll go and like look at these things and they remind me that like I'm doing something like, for every 500 like nasty people telling me to kill myself, there's like still, like this one 15-year-old girl who thinks like
Mhm.
what I'm doing is awesome and like I make her want to be in sports. And that
Mhm.
that helps a lot, and it makes me really happy that, you know, I've helped more people want to be in sports because sports should be for everybody. That's
Mhm.
the biggest thing is like the gatekeeping needs to stop, like but I don't know if people realize this, but they only make themselves look bad when they try to gatekeep, because they're
Mhm.
literally announcing to the world that they don't think that people should be equally accepted in places. And I'm like, do you not realize, like, you're tweeting this, like, you're telling people that you're sexist? Do you not understand what, like the amount of times people just tell on themselves on social media? I'm like, what? Do you not, you don't understand what you're doing here? Okay,
Mhm.
interesting. So,
Yeah, it's been unreal, but I am so glad and not even surprised at all that you get those messages from the young girls because you are just amazing. And I've always
thank
loved following you. And for every girl out there that's watching this or listening to this right now that wants to be you when they get a little bit older, what advice do you have for them just to keep going in sports?
oh man. Well, I would say for starters, like, you should not strive to be me. You should strive to be better than me. It's kind of like when you're a parent, you want your kid to grow up better than you, I guess. That's kind of how I feel. Um, I would say you've got to really want it, you know? It's like that Ron Swanson quote where he's like, never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. Like, you really have to want it to be in sports. Like, you got to be a little bit crazy and you have to be really tough, because it might not happen for a while, but eventually you're going to experience some of the same crap that you and I and most women, like, I've never met a woman in sports who hasn't at least had like one of these experiences that we all
Mhm.
share. So, like, you just have to be prepared to be tough and to remember that what these people are saying to you says a lot more about them than it does about you.
Mhm.
Like, when someone's anti Semitic towards me, I'm like, okay, well, that just makes you an anti-Semite. It doesn't make being Jewish bad. So,
Yeah.
that would be my advice, is just, be prepared to be tough. And like, and also, this stuff is not the end of the world.
Mhm.
This is sports, and sports are amazing. But I mean, we're seeing it especially this week. Like, we're recording on, it's like Friday. We're still waiting to hear about the election. Like,
Mhm.
I've been trying to do my work all week long, and all week long I'm like, okay, like, we're literally waiting to find out the fate of our country. Like, I really don't care that, like, I care, but I don't care that much. I wish I could, but like,
Mhm.
this is not important. And so make
Yeah.
sure that you have a life outside of sports too. That's the other thing I would say, because I was really consumed over the last few years with sports. And I have to say, like, this is one of the few good things that's happened to me because of the pandemic, which obviously not a good thing, but I've had a lot of time to like rediscover things that I liked to do that I
Mhm.
wasn't making enough of a priority, because I thought that I just had to be on sports all the time. And instead, what
Mhm.
was happening was I was just burning myself out. And we did a puzzle last night, like, for no reason. It's just two Dalmatian puppies next to a little fire truck toy, and it's
Oh.
adorable. And like, just, or like, I've been drawing, doing more yoga. Like, just make sure that you have a life outside of sports. You have things that make you happy, like, that you don't live your life just based on like hoping that someone's going to retweet you, and hoping that someone on your team is going to hit a home run, because at the end of the day, like, that's not the athlete's entire life, so it shouldn't be yours either.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I could not agree with it more. I think you perfectly summed it up. And that's something I've learned too during quarantine and COVID, because I was working with two sports last year. I was literally burning myself out, just sports 24/7. So like starting the podcast was something new that I did during quarantine. So couldn't agree with it more. You just need that mental break. And like you said, sports
Oh
are a
yeah.
game, like they're fun. Like people should enjoy it and not get too serious about it. So totally agree. And then tell everyone, just final question, where can they follow both you and Girl at the Game?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. It's funny because I just recorded my work podcast, Locked On Red Sox, so I have my whole spiel. Like, you can follow me on this.
Perfect. Let's hear
Locked On.
it.
So you can follow me on Twitter at GFSTARR1. You can follow Girl at the Game. It's just Girl at the Game, no spaces. It's all lowercase. If you like the Red Sox, you can listen to Locked On Red Sox. That's my daily show with the Red Sox on the Locked On Podcast Network. Girlatthegame.com is where all of our articles live, and we have the podcast too. And then we're also on TikTok. We have the Girl at the Game TikTok, which is a new challenge, but also really addictive. Like, I'm spending way too much time making these TikToks and they're not even super creative. Like, there's people levitating on that thing, and I'm just like, here's my eggs, whatever. But yeah, so we have Girl at the Game TikTok too, and Girl at the Game Instagram, and everything Girl at the Game. So yeah, that's everything.
Perfect. Well, everyone give Gabrielle a follow. I promise you will not regret it. She's one of my favorite follows.
Thank
But
you.
Gabrielle, thank you so, so much for the time. It's been an honor. And I feel like you can just be welcome back whenever you want. I will have you on the show.
Anytime you want, just you know where to find me. Hit me up.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Try to get through the rest of the week with all this madness. Like Gabrielle said, it's still election week, still
Oh my
waiting.
god.
So just hang in there and I got you.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.